All right, so today we're diving into how to prepare for a weaving textile technician interview.
Yeah, it's a cool field, right? You're basically taking those raw materials and turning them into.
The fabrics we use every day,
Exactly. And those looms are.
getting more high-tech all the time.
Yeah.
But first, we need to get you the job.
Yep, let's do it.
Okay, so RoleCatcher identified some pretty common questions they ask in these interviews.
Right. Like the first one they'll probably throw at you is describe your experience with operating and maintaining weaving machinery.
Okay, so like how do you make that answer stand out though?
Don't just list off machines,
Yeah.
talk about the specific models, the training you've had,
Oh, I see.
and even some cool projects that you worked on.
So instead of saying like I've worked with rapier looms, you'd say something like I've got tons of experience operating and maintaining Dornier rapier looms, like even troubleshooting those weft insertion problems and doing those like preventative maintenance routines.
Exactly. The more specific you are, the more you're showing them that you're an expert.
Right.
And they'll probably ask some follow-up questions like, what's the most challenging maintenance issue you've had to deal with and how did you solve it?
Like tell me about a time you solved a problem.
Exactly.
I bet RoleCatcher's AI could help with that.
Oh, for sure.
I think you mentioned that it like tailors the answers to what the employer is looking for.
Right. It looks at that job description, picks up on the specific skills that they need, and then it can help you to structure your response to highlight the experience that fits.
So it's like a custom interview guide.
Exactly. Make sure that you're hitting those important points.
Awesome.
Hmm.
Okay, so moving on to the next question. I think you said they might ask you to describe the process of setting up a loom for weaving.
Yep.
So I'm guessing it's more than just like a basic understanding they're looking for here.
Oh, yeah. They want to see that, they do the whole thing, from winding the work yarns to threading the heddles and setting the reed.
Um, for those of us who aren't like weaving experts, what do all those terms even mean?
Haha, good question. Okay, so those warp yarns are the lengthwise threads that make up like the base of the fabric.
Yeah.
The heddles are these little wire loops that lift and lower those warp threads to make the patterns. And the reed is like this comb-like thing that keeps all those warp threads evenly spaced.
Wow,
It pushes those weft threads together.
it's amazing how much goes into like just creating that fabric.
Oh, it is. And you got to do all that setup with a lot of precision because even a little mistake can totally mess up the fabric.
Yeah, no pressure.
Right. So be ready for some follow-up questions too. Like, what are common mistakes that beginners make when they set up a loom? Or like, how do you change those loom settings to get different weights or textures in the fabric?
So they're testing that technical knowledge and how well you solve problems.
Absolutely.
And I know RoleCatcher's career guide for weaving textile technicians says that attention to detail is super important. So why is that such a big deal in this job?
Well, think about it. You spend all this time setting up this super complex weave pattern on the loom, only to realize you messed up threading the heddles.
Oh, no.
Now you got to unwind all that yarn, rethread the whole thing, and you might even miss a deadline.
Oh, that's...
So yeah, attention to detail is key.
Yeah, that would be a costly mistake, too, in terms of like materials and time.
Right.
Okay, so moving on. What's next?
Get ready to show off your troubleshooting skills because they're going to ask, how do you troubleshoot weaving issues during production?
Okay, every job has its challenges,
Yeah.
right? So what are they hoping to hear when they ask you this?
They want to see that you don't panic when something goes wrong, that you have a system for fixing it.
Okay.
Like, do you start by checking the tension of the warp threads? Or do you look at those heddles to see if any are broken or misthreaded? Do you check the machine settings and make adjustments?
So it's about showing them that you have a process for figuring things out.
Exactly. And a good way to really show your experience is to give a specific example, like talk about a time you ran into a tough weaving problem and what you did to fix it.
Oh, yeah. This is where RoleCatcher's AI video feedback would come in handy.
Oh, totally.
I've heard it's like a virtual mock interview.
It is. You can record yourself answering these questions, and the AI will tell you how you did, like your delivery, your tone, even your body language.
Wow. So you can make sure you're coming across as confident even when you're talking about a tough situation.
Right.
That's awesome.
Oh.
Okay. What other questions should our listener be ready for?
Get ready to talk about quality control because they'll probably ask how you make sure those quality standards are met during production.
It seems like quality is important for any manufacturing job.
Oh, it's huge. And they want to know that you get that, how to be consistent and meet those high standards.
So how do you impress them with your answer?
Think about the specific ways that you keep an eye on that weaving process. Do you look at the fabric to see if it's okay? Do you use tools to make sure everything is uniform? Are there tests you do to make sure it's strong enough?
It's like being a fabric detective.
Haha, yeah. Looking for any little flaws.
Right.
And you can really make your answer strong by mentioning how you stay up to date on the latest quality control standards and testing methods.
Shows you're always learning, which RoleCatcher's career guide says is super important for this job.
Exactly. All right, now let's see if you can get creative with this next question.
Okay.
They might ask you if you've ever come up with new weaving techniques or processes to make production better.
Okay, so here's where you can show them you're an innovator, not just someone who follows the rules.
Exactly. Have you figured out a way to make something faster, or to reduce waste, or to make the fabric even better? This is your chance to brag a little.
Okay, and even if you haven't completely changed how weaving works, you can still show them that you're thinking outside the box.
Yeah. Right. Talk about how you like to experiment and try new things and how you're always trying to find ways to improve things.
Okay.
Now let's talk materials. They'll probably ask you about your experience with different types of yarns and fibers.
I guess they're seeing how much you know about fabric.
Exactly. They're looking for someone who understands how different materials work and how they affect the weaving.
So you can't just say, I've worked with cotton and silk.
Nope. You gotta go deeper. Talk about those fancy names like combed, cotton-spun, silk-worsted wool, and explain what makes them good or bad. You could even say something like, I noticed that mixing linen and viscose makes the fabric really breathable and drape nicely.
It shows, your stuff.
Right, and it shows you know how to pick the right materials for the job.
Speaking of knowing your stuff, RoleCatcher's career guide mentioned that sustainable materials are becoming a big deal in the textile industry.
Oh yeah, it's a good idea to bring that up in your answer. You can mention your experience with organic cotton or recycled polyester. It shows you're paying attention to what's happening in the industry.
That you care about the environment.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay, next question.
Get ready to talk about color because they might ask, can you describe your experience with dyeing and color matching for textiles?
The artistic side of things.
Exactly.
I got to make those fabrics look good.
Right. This is your chance to talk about color theory, different dyeing methods, and how you get those colors to match perfectly.
So don't just say, I've used dyes before.
Nope. Get into the details. Have you worked with natural dyes like indigo or madder root? What about those synthetic dyes? Have you ever had to match a Pantone shade?
So many details.
Right. This is where you show them how much you care about getting those colors right.
Like a painter mixing all those colors.
And remember, RoleCatcher's AI can help you practice these answers and see where you can improve.
Oh, right. It can help you figure out what you need to study more and make your strong points even stronger.
Yeah, it's like having a personal tutor for your interview.
Awesome. Okay, what's next?
Let's talk about designing, they might ask. Can you describe your experience with designing and producing woven fabrics?
This one is pretty open-ended.
It is. They want to see how involved you are in the design process. Like, do you work from patterns that are already made? Have you come up with your own designs? Have you tried different weaving techniques to get cool textures or looks?
So you're like the architect of the fabric.
I like that. And even if you weren't the main designer on a project, you can still talk about how you worked with the team, how you understood the design instructions, and how you were super careful about making the design come to life.
Okay, and last question for this section.
All right, let's talk about leadership. They might ask you to describe your experience with managing a team of weaving textile technicians.
So this is all about being a good leader.
Yes, they want to know if you can motivate and guide a team.
So have you ever trained new people, led a project, helped team members work out problems?
Exactly. Even if you've never had the title of manager, you can talk about times when you took charge, like organizing a group project, mentoring a coworker, or taking the lead to improve a team process.
Okay, cool. So we've talked about a lot of things so far. It seems like a weaving textile technician needs to know a lot about the technical stuff, and they have to be a good problem solver, but they also need to be creative and a good leader, and of course, love textiles.
Right, you got it.
But before we move on to part 2, where we'll dive into career paths and what the future holds for this field.
Let's think about what we just talked about for a sec.
Okay.
It's pretty cool how this job needs you to have all this technical skills, but also like good communication and problem-solving skills too.
Yeah, a weaving textile technician definitely has to think on their feet and be a good team player.
Totally. And those skills are only going to get more important as the industry keeps changing.
True.
So speaking of change, let's talk about where this job can take you.
Right. What kind of career paths are out there? What does RoleCatcher's guide say about moving up in this field?
All right, so the guide says you could become a supervisor or manager, like you'd be in charge of a bunch of technicians and making sure all the weaving goes smoothly.
Okay, makes sense. Like if you've got the experience and you're a good leader, that seems like the next step.
Right. What else?
It also talks about specializing. Like if you're super into a specific part of textile production, you could focus on that. Like maybe you love working with different materials, or you're all about quality control, or you're really good at figuring out how to make things more efficient.
So you could become like a specialist.
Yeah, exactly. You get to pick your own path.
I like that.
And no matter what you choose, you got to keep learning. The guide really stresses that, like, staying up to date on all the new technologies, the new materials, the new trends.
Yeah, because things are changing so fast, especially
Right.
with all that automation and digital stuff.
Totally.
Yeah.
And RoleCatcher actually has these AI tools that can help with that. Like they can connect you with courses and certifications and stuff based on what you're into and where you want to go with your career.
Oh, wow. So it's like having a personalized career guide.
Right. Pretty cool. Okay, so we talked about career paths, but let's go back to those interview questions for a minute and see if we missed any important stuff.
Sounds good.
We spent a lot of time on the technical questions, like about the machines and the materials and stuff. But what about those soft skills questions? You know, the ones that are all about how you work with other people.
Oh, those are super important too. Employers want to know that you can be a good teammate, that you can communicate well, and that you don't freak out when things get tough.
Right.
Remember that question about troubleshooting weaving issues during production? It's not just about knowing how to fix the machine.
It's about being a good team player.
Exactly. When you're telling them how you fix a problem, talk about working with your team, getting everyone's input, and finding a solution together.
Show them you're a problem solver and a team player, all in one.
Right. And when you're talking about quality control, make sure you talk about how detail-oriented you are and how good you are at following instructions, because that's super important for making sure everything is consistent and meets those standards.
Okay, and remember, RoleCatcher's AI can help you practice answering all these questions and get feedback on how you sound.
Oh, yeah.
You can record yourself answering prompts. Tell me about a time you had to deal with a difficult coworker. Or describe a situation where you had to go above and beyond to meet a deadline.
That's such a good way to make sure you sound confident and prepared.
Right. Okay, so we've talked about answering questions, but what about making a good first impression? What advice would you give our listener about that?
Okay, so first of all, do your research on the company and the job you're interviewing for.
Shows you're serious.
Right, and dress professionally. Be on time and be enthusiastic and engaged during the interview.
Show them you're excited to be there.
Yeah, they want to see that you love textiles and that you're ready to learn and grow.
Speaking of being excited about textiles, one thing I noticed about this job is how creative it is.
It is. It's not just about pushing buttons. It's about making those designs come to life and creating something beautiful and useful.
So how do you show that passion in the interview?
Good question.
Yeah.
Let your excitement show talk about what got you into this field, what you love about textiles, and what you want to achieve in your career.
Okay.
And don't be shy about showing off talk about your own projects, books, you've read courses, you've taken anything that shows you're dedicated to this craft.
Nice. And RoleCatcher's AI can actually analyze your answers and tell you if you need to add more passion or personality.
Oh, wow. It's like having a personality coach.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Okay. So enough about passion. Let's talk about practical stuff like salary and negotiating a job offer. What's your advice on that?
Okay, so it's really important to know how much people usually make in this field and to know what you're worth. Websites like Glassdoor and Salary.com can give you an idea of the salary ranges for similar jobs in your area.
Okay, good to know. And what about negotiating?
Be confident but respectful. Explain why you deserve what you're asking for.
Right. Be able to back it up.
Yeah, and be ready to walk away if they don't meet your expectations, because that shows, your worth and you're not afraid to stand up for yourself.
Good point. Okay, so I think we covered a lot in this prep.
Yeah.
We talked about career paths, soft skills, first impressions, showing your passion, and even negotiating a job offer.
It's been a good overview of what comes after the interview.
But before we wrap up this deep dive. Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about the future. What's coming next for this field? Because one thing that really stood out to me in RoleCatcher's career guide was like all this new technology that's changing the textile world.
Oh, yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, like all that automation, the digital design tools, even 3D printing. It's kind of changing how we even think about making fabrics.
That's like sci-fi stuff.
Right. So what does this mean for someone who wants to be a weaving textile technician?
Well, it means you got to be ready to adapt and learn new technology all the time.
Okay, so it's not just about knowing the old ways, but also about being tech savvy.
Exactly. I mean, just imagine in the future, you could be designing fabric on a computer, programming a loom to weave these crazy patterns, or even using a 3D printer to make custom textures.
Wow, that's wild.
The possibilities are pretty exciting.
Okay, so for someone who's listening and they're ready to jump into this world, what's like the one big piece of advice we want to give them?
Hmm. I'd say embrace that mix of tradition and innovation. Show them you've got the skills, show them you're passionate about textiles, and show them that you're ready to learn and grow as the industry changes.
I love that. And don't forget, RoleCatcher's AI tools can help you every step of the way, like from practicing those interview answers to figuring out your career path. It's like having a personal coach right in your pocket.
It's a game changer for sure.
Okay, so that's our deep dive into the world of the weaving textile technician. We hope you learned some new things, got some good tips, and maybe even got inspired to explore this amazing field a little more.
Yeah, and remember the future of textiles is happening right now, so go out there and make your mark.
You got this, and until next time, happy weaving.